Quorum call.
Madam Speaker,
Clerk will take the call. There being 130 members present, the House is now in session. Clerk will read a journal from the previous day.
Annapolis, Maryland, March the 6th, 2021.
Recognizing the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the journal from the previous day.
So orders, petitions, memorials, and other papers. At this point, I would like to call on the Chair of the Women's Commission, Women's Caucus.
Good morning, colleagues. And today, the women, and if all the caucus members in the Women's Caucus could stand. In the Annex 2, I hope. So today we are celebrating the passage of the 19th Amendment. Of course, last year we had all the plans to do that, but we got cut a little bit short. So we are wearing pearls today, as the Speaker has suggested. And we were able to locate our sashes that we had made for last year's celebration, so we are wearing them today on the floor. So we are wearing pearls because, as you may know, pearls have been a powerful symbol for women's organizations. Many suffragists, including Lavinia M. Engel, the first woman delegate representing Montgomery County in the Maryland legislature, wore pearls to show that wanting the vote did not mean they were any less feminine. Pearls are a symbol for many sororities, including Alpha Kappa Alpha, one of the nation's oldest sororities. As you may know, Vice President Harris honored Alpha Kappa Alpha by wearing a pearl necklace to her acceptance speech. So, in conclusion, I want to say that women belong anywhere policy is made. Women belong anywhere laws are passed. Women belong anywhere decisions are made. Women belong in the front office of the National Basketball Association, the major leagues. We belong everywhere. So thank you for participating today. Wear your sashes proudly. There were lots of women who fought very hard for a very long time to get us to where we are today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Report of the Committee on Economic Matters. Consent calendar number 43. Clerk, read the bill.
House Bill 529, St. Mary's County, alcoholic beverages, distillery on-site consumption permit, favorable.
Recognizing the chairman of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Who moves that the reading of the first bill be the reading for all the bills on the calendar?
So ordered. The question before the House is the adoption of the favorable reports. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable reports are adopted. All the bills on the report are ordered printed for third reading. Report of the Committee on Health and Government Operation. Consent calendar number 48. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 1033, Office of Healthcare Quality, Influenza Virus, Immunization, Education, and Information, Assisted Living Facilities, favorable.
Recognizing the committee chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the reading of the first bill be the reading of all bills on the calendar.
So ordered. Question before the House is adoption of the favorable reports. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable reports are adopted. All the bills on the report are ordered printed for third reading. Report of the Committee on Ways and Means, consent calendar number 46. Clerk will read first bill.
House Bill 1311, property tax exemption, disabled active duty service members, disabled veterans, and surviving spouses, refund, favorable.
Recognizing the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the reading of the first bill on the calendar be the reading of all the bills on the calendar.
So ordered. Adopt the favorable reports. All of the bills on the report are ordered printed for third reading. Report of the Committee on Appropriations. Report number 9. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 15, Governor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, favorable.
The question before the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read next bill.
House Bill 894, Education, Community Colleges, Collective Bargaining, favor of the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Be so much considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 delays implementation of collective bargaining for 8 large community colleges until September 1st, 2022, and further delays bargaining over wages until July 1st, 2023. For these larger colleges, delays implemented for 7 smaller community colleges until September 1st, 2023, and further delays bargaining over wages until July 1st, 2024 for smaller community colleges. The delays implementation, this also delays implementation of Baltimore City Community College until October 1st, 2024. With regard to faculty and part-time faculty, the amendment also reduces the bargaining units from 6 to 4, increases notification by community colleges of an election to public employees to 2 days, and makes conforming changes. Amendment numbers 3 and 4 clarify funding for Baltimore City Community College, since it is a state agency, to cover any additional costs arising from collective bargaining negotiations, require the adoption of regulations that are consistent with collective bargaining law under the State Personnel and Pensions Article, and makes clarifying and conforming changes. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. The question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 905, Education, Workforce Development, Sequence Scholarships, Eligibility, favor of the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So much considered to be reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
There are two amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 alters the eligibility. Move the amendment.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 922, State Retirement and Pension System, COVID-19 related death benefits, clarification, favor of the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So much to be considered reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
There are 2 amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 clarifies the definition of special death benefit and the procedure for applying for the special death benefits, as language that makes the proof subject to a rebuttable presumption, and as the reporting of the employer or unit of state government that employed the deceased member. Move the amendment.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. The question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Report of the Committee on Environment and Transportation, report number 22. The clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 284, Vehicle Laws, Dedicated Bus Lanes Enforcement. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 includes transit buses operated by or contracted for a state or local transit agency as an exception to the prohibition. And amendment number 2 authorizes the use of a dedicated bus lane by a vehicle making a right turn at the next intersection. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Recognize. Okay. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 564, Montgomery County Automated Traffic Enforcement Implementing Agency. Favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 619, Prince George's County Speed Monitoring Systems, Residential Districts, and School Zones. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
The amendments conform the bill to the Speed Monitoring System program in Montgomery County by striking expansion of school zone authorization. Move the amendment.
Question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 1117, Kent Narrows Bridge, State Highway Right-of-Way Fishing Prohibition. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Apologies, colleagues, but I have to do this. This bill narrows the scope of the area where fishing is prohibited in the Narrows. Move the amendment.
The question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment has been adopted. The question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Report of the Committee on Environment and Transportation, report number 24. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 801, Calvert County Public Safety, Buildings Used for Agritourism. Favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 802, Calvert County Sunday Hunting. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Be so much considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
As amended, HB 802 expands Sunday hunting in Calvert County by authorizing DNR to allow a person to hunt any game bird or mammal on each Sunday during the open season for that game bird or mammal. The amendments strike authorization for Sunday hunting on public land. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read next bill.
House Bill 991, Natural Resources, Forest Mitigation Banks, Qualified Preservation. Favor the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Be so much considered the reading of amendments.
So ordered.
As amended, HB 991 establishes the use of qualified conservation completed in a forest mitigation bank as a standard for meeting afforestation or reforestation requirements under the Forest Conservation Act. Credits in the mitigation bank may not be approved for debiting until qualified conservation of mitigation bank is complete. Amendment number 1 limits the mitigation credit for protected forests to 1/2 of the area protected. The second amendment reconstitutes the requirement that the Harry Hughes Center for Agroecology conduct a certain technical study on forests and FCA. Amendment 3 provides for retroactive effect to safeguard existing projects and those in the pipeline where credit was granted in good faith. And the fourth amendment states the intent of the General Assembly to review the technical study and consider any necessary changes to the FCA. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read next bill.
Report of the Committee on Environment and Transportation, Report number 25, House Bill 567, Montgomery County Cooperative Housing Corporations, Condominiums, and Homeowners Associations Reserve Studies. Favor of the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the subcommittee chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
As amended, the bill requires a study every 5 years of reserves for future major repairs and replacement of the common elements of a cooperative housing corporation, condominium, and common areas and homeowners association. The committee amendment simply specifies that updates are done every 5 years. Move the amendments, Madam Speaker.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read next bill.
House Bill 1023, Real Property, Condominiums, Homeowners Associations, and Cooperative Housing Corporations Virtual Meetings. Favor of the amendments.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the subcommittee chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
As amended, the bill generally permits governing bodies of a cooperative homeowner association, condominium, or homeowners association to authorize any meetings to be conducted or attended by telephone conference, video conference, or similar electronic means subject to specified standards. Amendment number 1 establishes that the authority to conduct electronic meetings established under the bill exists notwithstanding the language contained in the bylaws of the Common Ownership Community. And amendment number 2 changes the effective date to June 1st, 2022. Move the amendments, Madam Speaker.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Amendments have been adopted. The question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 1347, Real Property, Impermissible Restrictions on Use, Portable Basketball Apparatuses. Favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Report of the Committee on Ways and Means, report number 24. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 418, County Boards of Education, Symbols of Hate Policy. Favor of the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be consider the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 requires that as a part of a county board's policy prohibiting uses of symbols of hate. A student must be provided with the opportunity to remove or cover a symbol of hate, and alters the definition of symbols of hate to be symbols that express animus towards specified groups that may be reasonably forecast to cause a disruption. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Question now is adoption of favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted.
Sorry.
The gentleman from Calvert.
Thank you, Matt. I do appreciate it. I know this is a busy time. I would very much like to, because things are moving quickly, but I would very much like to look at this bill, because I do want to order an amendment, and I was hoping that we could special order it to the next session if you would be so kind as to do so.
Delegate, because you're one of my favorite people, absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much.
Question for the House is special order HB 418 to the appropriate time, not next session. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The bill has been special ordered. Clerk will read next bill.
Also 852, property tax sales, homeowner protection program. Favor the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing committee chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Thank you. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment 2 clarifies that municipal corporations are included in the program. Amendment 3 authorizes SDAT to cancel enrollment of a homeowner if their enrollment in the program ends. Amendment 4 provides that SDAT may not be sued for certain reasons when it's carrying out the program. Amendment 5 alters the funding sources for the program, removing the transfer tax and the fee on tax sale certificates, and instead funding by mandated general fund appropriation of $750,000 for 3 years. Amendment 6 delays the effective date of the bill until 2022, when the funding for the program will become available. Move the amendment.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
Also 854, Maryland Longitudinal Data System Center, inclusion of out-of-home placement data. Favor the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing committee chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment 1 is technical. Amendment 2 alters the type of information covered under the Act from out-of-home placement data to child welfare data, adds the Secretary of Human Services or the Secretary's designee to the MLDS Governing Board, and requires that data dashboards be submitted annually to the Governor and General Assembly. Move the amendment.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read next bill.
Also 901, Anne Arundel County hotel tax alterations, distribution of revenue. Favor the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So much to be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
The amendments dedicate 3% of the hotel tax revenues in Annapolis to housing assistance payments. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment has been adopted. The question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Report of the Committee on Environment and Transportation, report number 26. Clerk, read first bill.
House Bill 226, Baltimore City Complete Streets Program funding, traffic and vehicle monitoring systems. Favorable.
Question before the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read next bill.
House Bill 464, Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, mandatory referral review. Favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 755, Natural Resources, Complementary Anglers License, Disabled Veterans. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Be so much considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
As amended, HB 755 authorizes the Chesapeake Bay Trust to make grants from the Healing Hunting and Fishing Fund to provide free hunting and recreational fishing licenses and stamps to Gold Star recipients, certain veterans or members of the armed forces, and wheelchair-bound, permanently disabled individuals. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Report of the Committee on Health and Government Operations, report number 13. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 288, Audiology and Speech Language Pathology Interstate Compact. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much being considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendments number 1 and 2 are technical and make the bill more closely aligned with compact language and add clarifying language. Move the amendments.
Question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment has been adopted. The question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read next bill.
House Bill 368, Task Force on Oral Health in Maryland. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. Thank you. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 adds a representative from the Maryland Rural Health Association to the task force. It clarifies that the Maryland Department of Health's Deputy Secretary for Public Health Services will serve on the task force and co-chair the task force. And it requires the task force, when analyzing access to dental services, to focus on certain factors impacting access. Move the amendment.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment has been adopted. The question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read next.
House Bill 463, Maryland Health Equity Resource Act. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 establishes the Pathways to Health Equity program in the Maryland Community Health Resources Commission. Requires the commission to provide certain grant funding, issue certain requests for proposals, and issue an interim and final report of the grants provided. Establishes a Pathways to Health Equity Fund consisting of the Relief Act funds that were authorized for the commission, and provides for termination of the program. Amendment number 3 alters the membership of the Health Equity Resource Advisory Committee, establishes on that committee on July 1st, 2021. It alters the duties of the advisory committee, provides that the Secretary of Health may begin to designate health equity resource communities beginning July 1st, 2023, requires applicants for a health equity resource community to include federally qualified health centers or community-based organizations to provide health or wraparound community services, and strikes the language in the bill that would have authorized tax credits, loan repayment, or an increase in the alcohol tax. Move the amendments.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? No. The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? No. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. I see you there.
Oh, okay.
Are you sitting down now?
Can we stand up now?
Yeah. Let me explain. I had to say all this. Then I'm about to call on you, and you sat down. So are you up or down?
I'm sorry, Speaker. It's early. Is it time for me to speak? Yeah. Okay. Just a quick question for the floor
Gentleman
leaders.
from TELP.
Doing a couple up and downs to get the blood flowing this morning. I apologize. I'm glad I gave everybody a smile. With the amendments, I just wanted to check. In the fiscal note, it says there's an alcohol tax increase. Was that taken out of the bill, or is that still in the bill?
That's amendment number 3. We struck it out of the bill.
Okay, so that's out of the bill.
It's out of the bill.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional amendments, comments to the bill, to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Special order calendar number 67. Clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 890, Natural Gas, Strategic Infrastructure Development and Enhancement Surcharge and Plan. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the committee chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And we're going to move on from that one. As amended, House Bill 890 requires eligible infrastructure project costs collected under a surcharge for an approved gas infrastructure replacement plan to be included in base rates as part of rate adjustments made during a multi-year rate plan, with the surcharge continuing for eligible future projects that are not included in base rates. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 restores the existing cap on the monthly stride surcharge. Move the amendments.
The question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title? Question before the House is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Quorum call.
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will take the call. There being 137 members present, the House is still in session. Calendar of third reading, House Bills number 59. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 242, Family Law, Emancipation of a Minor and Authorization to Marry.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 97 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 242, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 306, hate crimes, false statement to a law enforcement officer.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 130 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 306, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 523, landlord and tenant repossession for failure to pay rent, registration, and license information.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
To explain your vote,
Yes, ma'am.
gentleman from Baltimore County.
Thank you. I'll be brief. So there are a lot of problems with the enforcement of our housing policy, specifically in Baltimore County. We see it especially in row home communities. We tend to ignore pretty much all of our housing laws as far as occupancy, as far as lead paint. I've had leaders of community associations tell me that we've had people raising chickens in a home. It's getting completely ridiculous. This bill prevents repossession if a property owner fails to procure a document about lead certification. Why are we letting these slumlords rent these properties if they don't have a lead certification? We are letting people rent properties who don't have a rental license. And I just think our housing policy is backwards. I think frequently we talk about the relationship of the landlord and the tenant, but I think we forget the community. And I think we tend to ignore all of our housing laws. We should enforce these laws before a property rented, not when a relationship between a landlord and a tenant is about to be dissolved. And that's why I'm voting no today.
Is there any further debate or explaining one's vote? If not, the clerk will call the roll. There being 96 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 523, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 769, Montgomery County Housing Opportunities Commission, public body.
It's on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 134 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 769, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 1000, Estates and Trust, guardian of property of minor or disabled person, prohibition on distribution of or disbursement.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 137 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 1000, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next.
House Bill 1058, Public Ethics, Disclosures, Training, and Use of Confidential Information, Integrity in High Office Act.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Everyone recorded their vote. Does anyone care to change their vote? Not, the clerk will take the call. There being 138 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 1058, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Calendar of third reading, House Bills number 62. Clerk, read first bill.
House Bill 829, Economic Development, Small Business Financing, Loan Loss Reserve, Maryland Capital Access Program.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 112 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 829, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 832, Public Utilities, Electric School Bus Pilot Program.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 97 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 832, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 875, Electricity Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard Qualifying Biomass.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 96 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 875, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1062, Education, Student Data Privacy, Reports and Student Data Privacy Council Sunset Extension.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 113 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 1062, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 1187, Juvenile Law, Juvenile Justice Reform.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 94 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 1187, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 1213, Financial Institutions, Determination of Creditworthiness, Evaluation Rules, and Alternative Methods.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 100 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 1213, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Calendar of third reading, House Bills number 60. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 18, Landlord and Tenant, Residential Tenants, Right to Counsel.
Is on third reading and final passage.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the gentleman from St. Mary's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We had some debate on this bill yesterday with amendments. I just wanted to touch on it a little bit, just grabbing some notes here. Often we talk about the effects of bills like this on the landlord, but we never talk about the effects of a bill like this from the tenant's perspective. And you got to take just not this bill, but the whole slew of bills coming out of this General Assembly this session. we've had 6 or 7 housing bills. And I remember from the time I started running for office, you do these public forums. They're always asking you about affordable housing. And then, in my opinion, we watched the General Assembly pass bills that have nothing to do with affordable housing. They've actually made the cost of housing more expensive for everyone. Look, when you're keeping tenants that are not performing and refuse to pay the rent and take advantage of the landlord, it affects housing across the whole sector. It gets more expensive. Let me give you a quick analogy. If you wanted to rent a car and you refuse to bring a car back after 7 days, it's a $500 fine and up to a year in jail. It's considered stolen. But we had the floor leader talk about eviction process that lasted in some jurisdictions months. The difference between a car and a house is probably 6 times more expensive. And if it takes months to get a bad tenant out of your property, someone pays the bill on that. It raises the cost of housing for everyone. Now, we have a bill here that has another funding mechanism. Some people might think it's tolerable for the landlord. I don't know. I personally just don't think it's enough money to accomplish the goal, and I'm sure in future years we'll probably be expanding that fund. But costs like this it's undeniable, be passed on to the tenant. So in this bill, you have tenants not paying their rent, providing attorneys for tenants that do pay their rent. I don't think that's fair from the landlord's perspective or the overwhelming majority of tenants that do the right thing, that are good, and they're just trying to find affordable housing. So many of our landlords, like I touched on yesterday, are almost forced into landlord because they're moving, they don't have equity in their property to sell. And what we've done is really, really harm those people, the people that own less than 4 units with bills like this, the people that are in the military, get shipped out overseas or to another base, and they're forced into landlords. And now we're keeping bad tenants in their property and really extending the entire process. So with that, Madam Speaker, and I would urge my colleagues on a red vote on this, and thank you again for your time.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the good delegates' comments, but I want to give you all a number. 2,500 families over the last 9 months have been evicted in the great state of Maryland, even with all the protections that this administration has tried to put in place during this COVID pandemic. And I think it just shows how much housing for all of us has been our safety, our place of work, has helped us get through this rough time. And what this bill does, and why I brought it forward, is to bring parity to the situation at hand. Currently in Maryland courtrooms, 96% of landlords are represented. 96% right now, landlords are represented in eviction proceedings. You want to know the amount of tenants that are represented? 1% of tenants are represented in courtrooms. And I encourage you, as I have done myself personally, not just in my home county of Prince George's, but I've been in Anne Arundel and several other counties, sit through an eviction docket. Sit through what's been said. Sit through the at ease in which people are getting evicted and about the amount of tenants. 80% have valid defenses. And when a tenant has an advocate, when a tenant has an attorney, those defenses are brought forward, and those that have counsel, and we've seen this bill is not a new concept. There are other states like New York that have representation. 80% of those tenants are able to stay in their homes because of a valid defense. This bill will bring parity to our system. This bill will allow those that have defenses to their eviction to know them. And all I know is that my 3 years of law school, sitting for several bar exams, I would not want to be in any court proceeding without an attorney. And I don't think any of you would want to. And another point that I'd like to highlight, Madam Speaker, is that this bill is also cost saving to our state. What hasn't been discussed on second reader and today is the $90.5 million that our state of Maryland will save, not in homeless in services to homeless, $38 million in foster care. These are also families and children and babies that are being evicted in our state. Right to counsel is not a guarantee, it's a fair shot. It's a chance to say what's going on in the situation, the habitability issues, the retaliatory actions of the landlord. And we have to trust that with that, and as the data has shown, that tenants will have a fighting chance in a system that is so skewed against them. Madam Speaker, I encourage my colleagues to vote green on this bill, to join other states that are leading the way to provide protections for those least among us. And I also want to highlight in this legislation, not every tenant qualifies. You have to meet the income requirement, which means these are the most vulnerable people that are being evicted in our state. 2,500 families losing their homes in the greatest crisis we have ever seen. I don't think I have to say anything else than that. Vote green on this bill. Thank you, colleagues.
Is there any further
Madam Speaker.
debate? Gentleman from Hartford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, this, like so many bills we hear in this body, is extremely good intentioned. And I'm grateful to my colleague in the Judiciary Committee for putting this bill forward. We're trying to find opportunities and ways to solve some of these issues and the unintended consequences in our law. But I was struck by something that the delegate mentioned, the floor leader mentioned, was 80% of folks in these matters would be able to not be evicted if they had counsel. And the reason I'm struck by that stat is on one of the bills related to this in this package we debated yesterday, the delegate from Allegheny had put an amendment in to have the judge or have judges determine who would be eligible for this right to counsel. And the debate on that bill had assessed that there's only so much money out there and only so few people would qualify for it. And because there's limited resources, it'd be very judicious how that money is allocated. But if the stat is 80% of the people that are being evicted would qualify for this, that absolutely obliterates the physical note. Absolutely obliterates the physical note. And the companion bill we have coming up as a mechanism to help pay for this would barely scratch the surface if that stat is accurate. So that certainly is something that, you know, based upon that stat, needs to be unpacked a little bit more. So I'm very concerned about how we're going to pay for this. I know I don't want to get too off topic and talk about the companion bill that's coming up for the mechanism to pay for it. But for any of us to think that these fees, to follow up on what the delegate from St. Mary's said, that these fees won't be passed on to tenants, I'm just not sure that's realistic. For any of us who've ran a business or been responsible for a profit and loss statement, just because my expenses go up doesn't mean my margins change. So I have to capture that revenue from other places, certainly for the fees. And again, as a good business person or property owner, a probable expense, a possible expense has to be planned for as a probable expense. So even though it may be unlikely or less likely that I'm going to have to pay these additional fees to help pay for this bill, there's no doubt that I'm going to have to account for that. And you know, these fees might be as much as a $60 increase that could be charged multiple times a year. And then additional to
And again, I thought it was a really good argument yesterday that this would be very judicious and only done occasionally for the cases that are really noteworthy. But if we're expanding that to 80% of these cases, that means we're going to expand attorney's fees for property owners by 80%. And that is clearly going to be passed on to tenants. So now if I have to anticipate that my attorney's fees could go up $500 or $1,000 per eviction proceeding on top of the fees, divide that by 12, and then add that to the rent for a tenant. And how many folks in this state does that price out of the market? So again, I know we want to protect folks, and I agree with the intent of the bill. I'm just terribly concerned the unintended consequences of this could be very devastating to some of our lower income folks in the state, and that's why I'll be voting red. Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from Anne Arundel in the annex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I join our efforts to protect those that need to be protected. But I needed to point out that stat about 2,900 evictions also includes people who may have been evicted because they were tenants holding over or because they were wrongful detainers. Let me explain what a tenant holding over is. You could have a scenario where you have a military family where they've been stationed in another state. They lease their property because they want to return to our good state of Maryland for 2 years. After the 2 years, the lease is up. They notify the tenant that their time is ready for them to leave, and therefore the action they have filed, if that tenant won't leave, is a tenant holding over. Well, now you have a Maryland family, somebody who wants to return to her state, but they cannot return to their own property. And in that 2,900 stat, there was no differentiating how many of those were tenant holding overs or wrongful detainers, which are not the standard evictions. So I think we need to be careful with that stat when we make our decision on this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The minority whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'm glad that the sponsor of the bill stood up to address a paragraph in the bill that was exactly why I was standing. And it talks about 1% of tenants are represented in eviction proceedings. Approximately 96% of landlords are represented by an attorney or specialized agent. I, too, have sat in rent court. I am a property owner. I've owned properties in the city, in the county, in Harford County, and other places. And unfortunately, I've had to go to rent court. And I can tell you, as a property owner, you only go a couple times, and then you hire somebody to go. Because it cost about $15, $20 as a property owner to pay a company to represent you. They're not an attorney. This is a, what did you call it, a specialized agent. That's why 96% of property owners don't go to rent court, because it's a colossal waste of your time when you can pay somebody $15 or $20. And I want you to know that property owners don't want to evict people. Property owners want to provide housing for families. Sure, there's bad apples. There's bad apples everywhere. That's humanity. But for the most part, these property owners want to provide housing, and they want to help their renters stay in their apartment. One, because it's the right thing to do, and secondly, because it costs a lot of money when your tenant moves out. You have to repaint, recarpet, re-rent. I mean, there are a lot of expenses to turn over in your property. So, property owners do go to rent court. They do have a specialized agent, for the most part, that represents them. They do want to work with tenants, but the reason they have to go to rent court is because a lot of tenants won't pay their rent until they get a notice from the court. I'd rather we give people more than 5 days. It's the 5-day limit. But if you don't bring renters to rent court when they get behind in the rent, they cannot catch up. Once somebody who's living paycheck to paycheck gets more than a month or two behind in the rent, there is no way for them to catch up. So allowing their case to go on and on and on doesn't help the renter because they get pinged on their credit score. And it doesn't help the property owner because they want to work with the tenant, but eventually they've dug the hole so deep that they simply can't climb out. This is a bad bill. It makes it seem like the bad, mean property owners just want to evict people. And I want to tell you that's not true. I would venture to say 98% of the property owners are good property owners with safe and clean property that they're presenting. And I would live in every property I own. And every property owner I know says the same thing. So let's not just continue to create a narrative that property owners are the bad guys. They're not, and this is a bad bill.
Okay. Recognizing the gentleman from Charles.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It sounds like there's like a confusion going on here about right to counsel. It's not a guaranteed right to a change of facts. And see, I did this in D.C. lawsuits in court, and we represented individual tenants. The biggest nightmare you'll ever face as a trial attorney is to go against, they call it a pro se litigant. It's a waste of court time. It's a waste of your time. They're allowed to do and say pretty much anything they want. There's no laws of evidence. There's no laws of procedure. It is a nightmare. The way I see this bill is actually narrowing this a little bit. Number one, because many times you can't change the facts as an attorney. God knows I have conversations every morning with my clients about that. But what you can do is narrow the facts. You can let them know their rights. Because when I was in D.C. law students in court, these malefic and noisome clients aren't as bad as people think. Sometimes they're living in these horrifying conditions, and they don't even realize it. That they're living in an apartment, basement of an apartment with no window, getting charged a ridiculous amount, and there is not even a license to rent. These are things they have a right to know. This is not a perfect mechanism. Believe me, there are going to be some overworked attorneys there. But they're not going to be sitting there to litigate everything. They're not going to be there to try and file wrongful documents and try and trick the court because there's a judge that they're going in front of and they're an attorney. All this is providing a little light at the end of the tunnel, and I will say it thins it out a little bit. This is not going to make the attorney for the renter's job more difficult. It's not going to make the landlord's job more difficult because now you can negotiate on an even playing field. All this is allowing is for a little equal negotiation, and it's going to make this go just a little faster because, as I said, if you're an active attorney, you know pro se litigants are a nightmare. We don't want anybody to get tricked. All we want them to know is that they have some rights. But again, this will never change the facts in a case. Please understand, this is not a bad bill. This is just trying to provide some opportunity. The individuals that haven't paid their rent and don't have a reason to not pay their rent, you know what's going to happen to them? They're going to get evicted. The ones that don't do the right thing, the bad apples, will be treated as bad apples. But some of the individuals who are getting caught up don't know their rights. All this is doing is ensuring that in this situation, they know their rights. Thank you.
Gentleman from Talbot in the Annex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the sponsor of the bill or the floor leader who spoke earlier please rise for a question?
Floor leader?
Yes.
So you brought up other areas in the country where this is already law. Could you, again, tell me what states, because you mentioned New York, what states currently have this as law?
Yes, I can. Give me 1 second. Oops, sorry, hold on. Now my computer wants to restart. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Well, Baltimore City already has the pilot, Philadelphia, Boulder in Colorado, New York City, San Francisco, Cleveland, and Newark.
I asked you what states. You said on the House floor by way of testimony that other states had this law. I'm merely trying to correct the testimony on the floor. So there are no states that have this law?
No, those states house programs that are just like this.
Well, okay, so municipalities, there may be some municipalities. So let's take New York City, for example. Is it the entire city of New York, or is it a few select zip codes within the city that have this?
From my understanding, it's available in New York City.
The testimony I would give to the folks on the House floor is that there are a handful of zip codes that have a bill like this available. So I guess the other question I would ask you, and I think it's important to ask, I mean, this is creating a right to counsel that's going to be paid for through a surcharge or fee. Do we happen to know how much the state is going to collect? Is there a fiscal note as to how much this program is going to collect by way of that fee that's coming up in a different bill?
I'm going to yield that to the chairman of the committee.
How about if that's okay, that'll come up in a separate conversation on a different bill.
It is a different bill.
Okay, so Madam Speaker, the only reason why I'm standing up on the floor today is to acknowledge the general fact is that we're doing something that's unprecedented as a state. There may be some municipalities that are approaching this, and I'm not completely sure that it's the exact same bill being offered for the exact same reason. We're creating statewide precedent. We're doing it in a way that affects the small landlords and the large landlords, and the reason for my standing up today is to correct the testimony. I would again ask the body to vote against this bill. Please stand with these landlords. At the end of the day, these are the folks that are offering housing, right? So we're bringing many bills, actually more bills on this single subject than almost any other subject in the General Assembly this year. And what did the landlords do?
Gentleman from Baltimore City.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There's been reference to the fact that there are a slew of bills this year. There are a lot of bills this year. There are a lot of laws on the books regarding landlord-tenant. We try to strike a balance between the rights of the tenant and the rights of the landlord. But as the sponsor of the bill pointed out, as the floor leader pointed out, when the landlord is represented 96% of the time and the tenant is represented only 1% of the time, those are bad odds. We don't need to authorize sports wagering to know that 96-1, that's bad odds. If we want the laws that we have written, that we have approved as the policy of this state to be carried out by the courts of this state, this bill, this right to counsel for a lawyer who speaks for their client is essential. I urge a green vote.
Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from Anne Arundel County in the annex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a few questions for the maker of the bill, if I could, please.
Yes, this is so exciting.
So I'm just quickly reading over the bill, and I just had one or two questions if you could clarify for me. It talks about the 50% of the median income for Maryland households. That median income is $40,000, so this bill would cover an individual renting a property making $60,000 and below. Is that correct?
So the way the 50% of median income works, it takes it in a culmination of what is in the family. So for example, someone could be making $50,000, but if you have 6 kids and you're supporting your spouse, you would qualify. And MLSC already has this language codified and uses the exact same codified language in this bill to determine for their other services. So this part of the legislation is already existing law, and we've already used that for qualifying services.
Okay, so it's also, so it's taking into account the total income for the household,
yes,
including services.
Yes, Delegate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Young lady from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am the landlord that this bill is going to impact. I have a rental property. I have multiple. I have one in Baltimore County. I have not raised the rent on that property in many years because I have a wonderful tenant, a wonderful family that lives there. I do not charge late fees when the checks come in late because I love them. That house in the market, not just this bill, but many bills, I feel are making being a landlord in Maryland untenable. And we've heard a lot about the intent of this bill, and I don't think that that's what's happening here. We don't need it. The intent is good, of course. The problem is, if my house sells and more of the neighbors in that street sell their house, there are less people providing homes to families who cannot afford to purchase homes. The family that I have in my home now lost their home in the housing bubble under predatory lending practices, which we have all tried to address on our body. They had their home taken from them, and it destroyed their credit. But when I met them, I knew immediately they'd be wonderful tenants, and so I rented my house to them anyways. Those are the families that are not going to have the opportunity to rent a home because I will no longer be renting a home. There are more people like me that own 1 or 2 or maybe 3 properties. We bought them as a way to have income once we retire. This isn't a lot of money we're going to make off this. We make almost nothing off of the property right now. I will not continue to be a landlord in the state of Maryland if these bills pass. I will not. I will sell that home, I will turn a profit on it, and I will buy a property in Pennsylvania. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker. Gentlelady from
Howard and Carroll.
Howard and Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. One of my colleagues from Anne Arundel mentioned an example of what might happen to an individual owner. I have a very specific example. One of my constituents wrote to me, and I want to read you just a part of what he and his wife said. To give you a little background about my family, my wife and I purchased our home in Sykesville, Maryland, the week after we were married in 2015. In 2019, we took an OCONUS deployment with the Department of Defense for my job. While stationed overseas, we have rented our home, forever home, and we are set to return in the summer of 2022. My wife is a Howard County teacher, currently on leave due to our deployment. As we are down one income, we rely on the rental income from our property to pay the mortgage. I understand that times are tough and due to the pandemic, but not all landlords are making profit hand over fist. Some, like us, are just covering the bills until our return. In a state like Maryland, we can't be the only ones in a situation like this. There are other Maryland taxpayers who are doing work for our country abroad, and this bill could bring upon financial hardship to those landlords. I ask you to think about situations like ours and to work to fix this bill. We only own one unit, and that unit is our forever home, waiting for our return to raise our family. I couldn't imagine not being able to cover the mortgage and losing the place we are excited to return to. I realize that this applies to a number of different bills, but if a free attorney is available, unfortunately, we're all human beings, and we aren't as good as many of you would wish that we were. That could change the sense of someone who may be confused, may say, I will stay, I won't stay. If they have this extra help, I just think it really imbalances the playing field in the wrong direction. Thank you.
Madam Speaker. Recognizing the gentleman from Western Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to speak briefly to one thing. There might be a lot of good reasons to support this legislation from a certain perspective, but it is, I think, a canard to suggest that the 96-1 factor that we've heard. My good friend, the minority whip from Baltimore County, explained something. I've been in, as I said, in landlord-tenant court. I don't do many residential, but I sit through them from time to time in district court. they're authorized representatives. That's included in that 96%. They aren't lawyers. That's your property manager. That's oftentimes the person who collects the checks at the property management office. Sometimes you can designate someone to go to court on a landlord-tenant matter on your behalf who's not a lawyer. And that also includes this one other important thing. We have a rule in the state of Maryland that individuals can represent themselves. We have a rule that if you're a quote-unquote corporation, a limited liability company, you're incorporated under some form or fashion, you as a non-lawyer, even though you own the company, cannot go to court and represent yourself. You have to hire an attorney. That's why this 96-1, it's not this imbalance that's being created of some silk-stocking lawyer is down in landlord-tenant court in Cumberland, Maryland, or Cambridge, Maryland, just beating the bejesus out of that poor tenant who's been ripped off by the law. That's not what's happening. People who are going for landlords to landlord-tenant courts as attorneys, some of them, again, they're not attorneys that we have. Why is that? Because an awful lot of landlord-tenant court is very cut and dried. The individuals did not pay the rent. I complied with the notice proceedings. I filed my eviction. I filed my notice to eject a tenant holding over. No one responded. Then it's court day. The judge has it on the docket. They're doing all that they can to preserve the rights of these folks, to make sure that they don't get trampled. And the person shows up. It's the first time the landlord has heard from them in 3 months. And the person says, I had a problem. My mother was sick. I was gone for a few weeks. Hey, judge, help me out. That's what a lot of landlord-tenant court is. It's not this magical mystery constitutional litigation situation. It's very cut and dried, very plain and simple, very common sense. Interjecting in an entire new classification of attorneys whose ethical jobs, and they're going to do a good job. MLSC will have some very good attorneys. Their job is going to be to come up with creative defenses and to litigate to the nth degree and turn this process that was very cut and dried, was a little bit delayed, there were lots of problems with it perhaps, they're going to turn it into something different. And it is going to drive up the costs, ultimately, for everyone. It won't be apparent in year one, it won't be apparent maybe in year two, but as the years go by, we'll have this system. Landlord-tenant law and landlord-tenant court will become a much, much more difficult place to be for everyone, and the costs will go up. And those costs will ultimately be borne either by the state taxpayers or by the tenants themselves, because that's how economies work. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Talbot.
Thank you, Speaker. And I don't want to belabor this because I know everybody's heard a lot, but my perspective on this legislation is a little bit different. I have a granular experience from this past year, and I'm opposed to the bill. I'm not opposed to the bill on behalf of the landlords. This bill is trying to fix a problem, and we talk about the odds. The odds of, was it like 99-1 or whatever? That's not the odds. The odds are with the tenant, with the person who's in crisis. When you're going through eviction, you are in crisis. And we have a societal problem right now because we have more and more people going into crisis, right? Those are the odds. And so the odds aren't about how you do in court on your eviction. The problem here, people are in crisis and they're in need. I've been dealing with eviction and people that don't have a place to live at night. And I've been dealing with landlords who are having all kinds of problems. So what is this? This is just going to kick this a little bit further down the road when it goes into effect, because I have no doubt we're going to vote it into effect. But the problem is these people are in crisis. They're not coming out of crisis. If we really wanted to fix the problem, this money, these resources, we'd be finding another way to apply those resources to help those people in crisis, because guess what? Regardless of how their dispute goes in court, they're still in crisis. Politics is downstream from society. We're not in front. What's going on the streets, that's dictating what we deal with and how we respond to it. I think this is a mistake. I think it's a big mistake because we're missing the problem. We're ignoring the problem. We're putting a stamp on it. We're going to say, okay, we fixed your problems because we've given you a lawyer. Well, the people I know who are in crisis and I tell them they get a lawyer, they're going to say, oh, wow, Johnny, that's great. That's great. What do I do next month? Because they're in the same position. This is a real problem. I understand the intent behind the bill. And you know, it is a wonderful intent. But the problem isn't representation. The problem is people are in crisis and they need help. Our community action organizations are on the street and they're out of money, they're out of resources, they're out of personnel. They're on the front line. This legislation, it's just going to make it more convoluted, more difficult. And the net result, yes, I come back to the landlord. The net result is the people who are making these, the housing available, the low-cost housing, they're going to see this go into law, and they're going to look at their books, and they're going to look at the past year, and they're going to change who they rent to, how they rent to, or they're going to get out of the business. And that's even a bigger problem for our community action agencies because they're trying to place people in affordable housing. And yeah, it's not the greatest housing. And yes, we have problems with our housing laws and our housing standards. And it's heartbreaking to be involved in that. But let's fix the problem. Let's get to the core of the problem. Now, we can't get it all right, but, you know, I know this is a lot of political back and forth, but, you know, I don't know. I just wanted to share that with everybody. That's why I'm opposing the bill, and I urge everyone else to oppose it. Thank you.
The gentleman from Howard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to say I am that person who is an incidental military member who now is a property owner. So really quickly, we got married, my wife and I, about 15 years ago. We were engaged about 6 months before we actually decided to buy one of our forever homes in Columbia, Maryland, because we wanted to live here. 3 months before we got married, we got orders to go overseas. The week after we got married, we moved overseas. We've rented that property in Columbia for the last 15 years. And for the last 10 years, we've actually had a family that has been part of one of the low-income voucher programs that Howard County runs very successfully, great tenants. So we come back from overseas, we buy our forever home, again, in Laurel, Maryland. Love that house. 2 years later, yes, you got it, we got PCS orders to move overseas yet again. So we moved overseas and rented that property there. So now we have 2 properties that we're renting out. And at this point, we moved back to Glen Ellen. Hopefully we'll be in this property forever. But I will just stand in opposition to say that at no point were we making money. We were just struggling to get by on those properties. And I agree with my fellow delegate that looking forward to selling those properties when we can do. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from Queen Anne's in the Annex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On the bill, I think the world will see that bills have unintended consequences, and I think the maker of the bill or the sponsor of the bill has good intentions. But I want to speak more towards myself as a realtor and what I see happening in the market. In my world, a couple of years ago, I used to be able to sell properties to people who wanted to rent them out to make a little bit of an income, to have a little bit of a nest egg. That's pretty much gone right now. People are no longer looking for it. And I think the people that will affect on this, the market will adjust because more and more you'll see the bigger people who can afford the lawyers and really high-priced lawyers, not the ones that are coming in there as a property manager or whatever. They're going to be loaded for bear, and they're going to be able to actually keep the way they're doing business, and everything will work out their way. This bill is going after people like me who may own a couple properties. And should I get a bad tenant? Who is a bad tenant? This isn't somebody who I've messed up with. I try to keep my properties perfect or as good as can be. But this is the person who is bad that I now have to go get a lawyer. I have to pay for stuff that's a cost to me. And I'm going to end up getting this person evicted and probably eating a lot of money during that tribulation or that trial that I have to go through. So I'm being harmed for the wrong reasons. There was an amendment the other day that offered a way out of this, a little bit of a fix, and it was rejected. Why should I, as a good person who's doing nothing really wrong, be confronted with a bad tenant, a terrible tenant, not just a bad one, who puts stuff in the toilet when they leave to clog it and whatever, and I'm right, but yet I will have to now go find an attorney. This person will be provided an attorney, and I'm sitting out there out of my money. They're going to get evicted. They're going to lose. But you're putting me in a spot to where I don't really even want to own this property. And let's not forget that the reason there's rental properties is that people need to live somewhere. And the people that are buying these rental properties, and again, you do have some bad people out there. You do have some bad renters or rental people who go out there and buy these properties. They don't keep them up. But you're out there, you're punishing those of us that are trying to do the right thing to provide these homes to people who can't afford. And you're putting another bill on us, you're putting another burden on us, and I think that's grossly unfair. Fix the problem, but this bill isn't the answer to that problem. Thank you very much.
Recognize any committee chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill provides a right to counsel to people who desperately need it. This bill provides a right to counsel to people who are seeing their homes overrun by rats, seeing their homes being structurally falling apart, dealing with landlords who don't pay the utilities that they say they're going to pay, dealing with landlords who are the bad landlords, who are not the majority of landlords in our state or in our country. These are, in fact, the bad apples. This program provides that limited right to counsel when those situations exist. It's run by not-for-profit organizations who are going to have to target the resources they receive, and I believe limited resources that they're going to receive, to make sure that they help the people who need the help the most. These, again, are people in the bill who are being retaliated against because they say, there's lead paint in my house. Or they discover there's lead paint in their house and it's not removed by the landlord. These are the people who need the help most. This bill is well-tailored, it's well-targeted, and it's going to help the people who need it. And that's why I'll be green. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady from Baltimore City.
Madam Speaker, I move the previous question.
Question is the previous question. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. On third reading and final passage, Clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
The gentleman to explain his vote.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think we all stand together in unity that we all want the bad landlords out, and we all want to fight homelessness. So when the sponsor of the bill brought the bill, and I appreciate her intent, and I stand with her on the intent, but I looked up the two cities that actively have this free counsel. It's San Francisco and New York City. San Francisco happens to be the most expensive city to rent at average of $3,500. New York City is second in the country at $3,000. My concern, once again, is the unintended consequences of pushing up prices and pushing more people into the position of not being able to afford to rent, which then causes more homelessness. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Caroline to explain his vote.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll be very brief here. Right to counsel, as far as I know, tenants already have a right to counsel. They do. There's no prohibition or there's no law that says they can't have counsel. I guess what this bill is going to do is it's going to create a new safety net program that's going to allow a certain service that's going to be paid for someone other than the user. That's basically what this bill really does. So, I'll be voting, obviously, red on this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Baltimore County in the Annex. to explain his vote.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just want to share some information on why I'm voting red on this bill. I've been in the real estate business now for probably 35 years. I've seen everything. I've had one tenant that actually, his grandmother passed 4 times. This is not a joke. We want to definitely stop the bad actors, that's for sure. Nobody wants to see anybody live in substandard situations. I don't think any good landlord will want to do that. Talking about what's going on in my district, we've tried to identify and try to come up with a plan how we can identify these bad actors. We had a rental property on Wise Avenue that was unregistered. There was a double homicide taking place. I had the facility, I had the information in front of me to be able to run, well, there was a owner-occupied receiving his homestead property tax credit, so I did. Found out that this guy was a homeowner, but he wasn't getting a property tax credit. He was doing this to take and skate doing the right thing, registering as a property, rental property, and the lead paint and everything else. We tried 2 or 3 times to get something passed to help identify these bad landlords. And, we need to definitely do something about that for sure. And that's why I'll be voting red. Thank you.
Clerk will take the call. 95 votes in the affirmative. House Bill 18, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 37, procurement prevailing wage, applicability.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 96 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 37, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 106, consumer protection, robocalls and spam calls, website to report and annual report.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 128 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 106, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 174, public utilities, investor-owned utilities, prevailing wage.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 96 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 174, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 264, solid waste management, organics, recycling and waste diversion, food residuals.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 97 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 664, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 507, Clean Water Commerce Act of 2021.
Is on third reading and final passage. The gentleman from Calvert.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just want to read from the purpose paragraph of the fiscal note. It says, for House Bill 507, the so-called Clean Water Commerce Act of 2021, that the Maryland Department of the Environment will transfer $20 million from the Bay Restoration Fund wastewater account to the Clean Water Commerce Fund, a new special fund established by the bill, an entirely new fund. Now, for as long as I can remember, the Republican Party has asked for lockboxes for funds. And for as long as I can remember, that has not been granted. And here's a great example. Here's a great example. There was a promise made that on your tax bill, the so-called Bay Restoration Fund line item would be used to upgrade all wastewater treatment plants in the state, no matter their size. And as my good friend from Southern Maryland once said, the former minority leader, that even with those upgrades, even with the best available technology, at least at that time, we still aren't taking the pharmaceuticals out of the wastewater. There's a lot of work to be done. A lot. And the fact that this bill takes the money and diverts it away from something so foundational and fundamental of what we all agreed upon is indeed, as I said the other day, fraud. It's fraud because you're collecting the money under one premise and using it for another. When I further read the bill, and it said that not only is the money being diverted, but the money is actually creating a new account, an entirely new program. And when I read the program, the so-called Clean Water Commerce Fund, and read about its purpose, you know what the first thing that came to me was? House Bill 507 is really the new rain tax. It most definitely is the new rain tax. And the reason why it's being hidden in this way, by taking money out of one account and putting it into this account, is to hide its true purpose. Just like the O'Malley rain tax, if you vote for HB 507, you're voting for the 2021 rain tax. And for all of those reasons, Madam Speaker, I'm voting against this bill.
Gentleman from Talbot.
Thank you, Speaker. And I'll try to be quick. I mean, I understand the intent of the bill to deal with TMDLs. TMDLs are a huge problem. However, the Bay Restoration Fund was created not to address TMDLs. It was to upgrade wastewater treatment plants. And I can also understand how policymakers in Annapolis would try to find a way to address TMDLs. And I can also understand how you would naturally go to the Bay Restoration Fund because of the funds that are there. That's a different type of thinking. The individuals, the people who are directly affected by this, though, don't view government programs the way we do. They view them very literally. They view them literally because they show up on their bill and they see that line item on their bill that says Bay Restoration Fund, okay? Not TMDL Fund. That's the problem. That's the problem. And I'm opposing this legislation, and there was a lot of discussion about the testimony yesterday when we debated the bill. Nobody testified in opposition to the bill. Well, I'm standing here today, and I'll say I'm standing here today on behalf of the taxpayers in my district, okay, who didn't have an opportunity to testify, who don't even know this bill is before the General Assembly. And I'll say the taxpayers in my district would be infuriated to know this money was being taken from the Bay Restoration Fund and siphoned off into a new fund. So I'd like to add that negative testimony to the record and urge a negative or a red vote on this bill. Thank you.
The gentleman from Baltimore County in the annex and the sponsor of the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think it's very important to point out that this legislation, the Clean Water Commerce Act of 2021, builds on the existing Clean Water Commerce Fund that was established in 2017 per the request of the Maryland Department of the Environment under Governor Hogan. That bill expanded the authorization for uses of the Bay Restoration Fund to include uses in addition to retrofitting wastewater treatment plants. So the Clean Water Act account that is set up by this bill, it is not new. It builds on legislation proposed by Governor Hogan in 2017. Thank you.
Any further debate? Not, clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 97 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 507, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 1180, property tax credit, airport noise zones eligibility.
It's on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 109 in the affirmative, House Bill 1180, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed.
Madam Speaker.
The majority will.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, as a part of our House rules, it is required that you vote if you are sitting in your seat. Let me just say that you can retire to the lounge, you can retire to the hallway, but under no circumstances can you sit in your seat and not cast a vote. Those are the rules. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Committee chairs, if you can come forward, please. Could everyone please take their seats? We will be coming back at 5 p.m. this evening. I want to call on the Republican Caucus chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, the Republican Caucus, please pay attention to your email this afternoon. The Republican Caucus will be meeting at 4:30.
Okay, that ends the work at the desk. Committee bill hearings are listed on the Maryland General Assembly website. Quorum call before adjournment.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their presence? The clerk will take the call. There being 133 members present, the House is still in session, recognizing the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House stand recessed until Thursday, March 18th at 5 p.m., Legislative Day, March 7th.